In 2022, the Federal Reserve published a finding that barely made the news. Households carrying revolving debt reported spending an average of 11 hours a month actively thinking about it, not paying it, not managing it, just thinking about it. That is more time than most people spend planning their entire financial future. Here is the gap. Everyone talks about interest rates. The APR on your credit card, the rate on your car loan, that number gets all the attention. And look, the rate matters, but the rate is only one layer. Underneath it, debt is running three separate costs against you simultaneously, and only one of them shows up on your statement. So why do the other two keep draining you, even when you are making every payment on time? That question is what this video is about. Because if you only manage the number you can see, and the other two keep compounding quietly in the background, they shape the decisions you make, the risks you are willing to take, and the speed at which your future either builds or stalls. My name is Alex, and if you have ever run the numbers, paid the bills, and still ended up wondering where the month went, stay with me, because debt is not just a balance you owe. It is a system running against you, and I'm going to show you exactly how that system works and the precise sequence to dismantle it. Once you understand the full cost structure, you stop managing debt and start making decisions from a completely different position. Two people clarify this faster than any chart. Same city, same income, entirely different financial realities, and the gap between them had nothing to do with luck. Most people think the gap between financial stress and financial stability comes down to income. Earn more, and the pressure eases. That is the assumption almost everyone carries. It is also almost entirely wrong. Take two people. Marcus is a project manager in Austin, pulling in around $71,000 a year. Rachel is a marketing coordinator in the same city, earning $68,000. Close enough that on paper, their lives should look roughly similar. Same rent range, same grocery bills. The same cost of living is pressing down on both of them, but their months feel completely different. Rachel has 3 open debt accounts, a credit card balance sitting at $9,400, a car loan with 22 months left, and a student loan she has been paying since she was 23. Every month, a combined $1,217 leaves her account before she has made a single decision about her own future. It just goes, automatically, quietly, to 3 different lenders who will never know her name. Marcus made his last debt payment 14 months ago. In the 12 months that followed, he invested more than he had in the previous 7 years combined. Not because he got a raise, not because his expenses dropped dramatically, because $1,200 a month stopped belonging to someone else and started belonging to him. That is the gap. Not income, not discipline, not some personality difference between two people who happen to live near each other. The gap is what their money is physically forced to do the moment it arrives. Here is what makes this harder to see than it should be. Rachel is not doing anything wrong. She is paying on time, every single month. Her credit score is good. By every conventional measure, she is handling her debt responsibly, and she still ends each month feeling like she ran hard and went nowhere. That feeling is not anxiety. It is arithmetic. In 2026, the average American household carrying revolving debt holds a balance of around $10,300 across credit products, with an average interest rate just above 21%. That means the typical indebted household is paying roughly $2,000 a year just to stay in the same place, not to reduce the balance meaningfully, just to cover the cost of carrying it. Rachel is not an edge case. She is the median. And Marcus is not exceptional. He just crossed a line that changed what the numbers do next. That line is worth understanding precisely, because the difference between Rachel's month and Marcus's month is not really about the $1,200. It is about what that money was quietly costing her in ways that never appeared on a single statement. There are 3 of those hidden costs. Each one operates differently. Each one runs continuously. And the first one, the debt tax, is the most measurable and in some ways the most brutal. Nobody thinks about the money they never see. That is the problem. When Rachel looks at her monthly budget, she sees the $1,217 leaving her account. She registers it as an expense, the same way she registers rent or groceries, something that costs money and then stops. But that framing is missing the most important part of the transaction, because that money does not just disappear. It transfers. It moves from her future into someone else's present. And it does that every single month without exception. Here is the mechanism. Every dollar that goes toward interest is a dollar that cannot compound. And compounding is not a bonus feature of investing. It is the entire engine. The way it works is simple. Money that grows gets reinvested, and then that larger amount grows again. Over time, the growth stops being linear and starts becoming exponential. The longer the money stays invested, the more violent that curve gets. Rachel's $1,217 a month is being permanently removed from that curve. Not borrowed from it, removed. There is no recovery window. The month she paid interest instead of investing is a month that does not come back. Run the numbers, and this is what you get. $1,217 a month, invested consistently at a 7% average annual return, grows to just over $90,000 in 5 years. In 10 years, it will cross $220,000. In 20 years, it will reach $716,000. Rachel contributed around $292,000 of that herself. The remaining $424,000 is purely the result of time and compounding working uninterrupted. That $424,000 is what the interest payments cost her, not the interest itself. The opportunity of interest was eliminated. Marcus understood this, even if he could not have drawn the math out on a whiteboard. He felt it. The year after his last payment, he did not spend more. He did not change his lifestyle in any visible way. He just redirected the same money that had been leaving his account every month and pointed it forward instead of backward. The result was not gradual. It was immediate. His net worth moved in a way it never had during the years he was paying down debt. This is what makes the debt tax different from ordinary expenses. A high grocery bill costs you money. A high interest payment costs you money and confiscates the future value of that money at the same time. You pay twice. Once now, and once in the form of the wealth that never gets built. And look, the math is uncomfortable because it is so clean. There is no way to argue with it. The compounding either works for you or against you. There is no neutral position. But the debt tax is only the first layer. The second one does not show up in any calculation. It does not touch your bank account at all. It operates somewhere quieter than that. Inside every career decision, every risk you consider, every opportunity that crosses your path. That is what makes the silent partner so hard to see and so expensive to carry. Nobody puts debt on their org chart, but it has a seat at the table anyway. This is the cost that never shows up in a spreadsheet. The debt tax is measurable. You can run the numbers and see exactly what compounding you forfeited. But the silent partner operates differently. It does not touch your account balance, it touches your judgment. And it does that every single time you face a decision that involves risk, change, or opportunity. Think about how Rachel's month actually works. She wakes up, goes to work, and does her job well. Nothing about her daily life looks like a person in financial trouble, but somewhere in the background, a calculation is always running. Not consciously, not deliberately, just quietly. The way a background app drains a battery without ever appearing on the screen. Every time an opportunity surfaces, so the first filter it passes through is not excitement or ambition. It is whether the monthly obligations can still be met if something goes wrong. That filter has a cost. A colleague mentions an opening at a smaller company, more interesting work, better long-term trajectory. But the base salary is $4,000 a year lower. For someone with no fixed debt obligations, that gap is manageable. A few adjustments and the transition works. For Rachel, $4,000 a year is $330 a month. That is the margin between her current payments and a missed one. The opportunity closes before she seriously considers it, or the side project she's been thinking about for 2 years. The one that would take 6 months of evenings and weekends, and maybe $3,000 in startup costs to test properly. For Marcus, $3,000 is a calculated risk on something with real upside. For Rachel, $3,000 is 2.5 months of debt payments sitting in a savings account she cannot afford to empty. This is what debt does to optionality. It does not eliminate choices. It makes every choice more expensive than it looks. The job opportunity, the business idea, the investment, the calculated risk, each one carries a hidden surcharge that only exists because of the fixed monthly obligation running in the background. In 2026, surveys of working Americans carrying significant debt consistently show the same pattern. Nearly 6 in 10 report turning down professional opportunities, including job changes, freelance work, and business ideas, specifically because of existing debt obligations. They did not lack ambition, and they lacked margin. Rachel is not risk-averse. She is margin averse. Those are not the same thing, and confusing them is expensive. Marcus does not have a higher risk tolerance because of his personality. He has it because his fixed obligations dropped to near zero, and the margin that created allowed him to say yes to things Rachel has to say no to. The difference between them is not character, it is structured. And here is what makes this particularly difficult to escape. The silent partner does not just constrain your financial decisions. According to peer-reviewed research, it is simultaneously running a third cost, one that operates inside your own mind, quietly reducing the very cognitive capacity you need to solve the problem. That cost has a name. It is the cognitive tax. And the science behind it is harder to ignore than most people expect. There is a study that should bother more people than it does. Researchers at Princeton and Harvard ran a series of experiments testing cognitive performance across people facing different levels of financial pressure. The finding was not subtle. People under financial stress performed significantly worse on tests measuring problem solving, planning, and decision making. Not slightly worse. The cognitive deficit they measured was equivalent to losing around 13 IQ points. To put that in context, that is roughly the same impact as pulling an all-nighter before a high-stakes workday. Except Rachel is not pulling an all-nighter. She is just carrying debt, and that state does not end in the morning. Here is the mechanism behind the number. The human brain has a finite amount of cognitive bandwidth at any given time. When a threat goes unresolved, the brain keeps allocating attention to it in the background. It is an evolutionary response, originally designed to keep physical dangers at the front of awareness. Debt triggers the same system. It is an unresolved threat. It does not go away between payments. It sits there, drawing a quiet but continuous tax on the mental resources Rachel needs for everything else. This is not stress in the vague, general sense. This is a specific, measurable reduction in the quality of thinking available to her on any given day. The meeting where she could not quite land the argument. The negotiation where she did not push hard enough. The problem at work that took 3 days to solve when it probably should have taken one. None of those moments felt like debt, but debt was in the room. And this is where the trap becomes structural. Rachel needs clear thinking to find better opportunities, negotiate better outcomes, make smarter financial decisions, and build a plan to get out. But the condition she is trying to escape is actively degrading the mental capacity required to escape it. The slower processor is being asked to solve the problem that made it slower in the first place. In 2026, financial stress remains the leading source of reported anxiety among working Americans under 45, ahead of health concerns and relationship difficulties. Around 64% of people carrying significant debt report difficulty concentrating at work. Nearly half report sleep disruption linked specifically to financial worry. These are not personality weaknesses. They are predictable outputs of a system under continuous low-grade pressure. Marcus does not sleep better than Rachel because he is calmer by nature. He sleeps better because his brain is not running a background process on an unresolved threat every night. The uncomfortable part of this is the sequence. The debt tax takes your future wealth. The silent partner takes your options. The cognitive tax takes your capacity to fight back against either of them. Each cost makes the other two harder to address. Together, they do not add up. They multiply, which means the reversal, when it finally happens, does not feel incremental either. When the last payment clears and all three costs lift at once, something shifts that goes well beyond a budget line. That moment has a name. And understanding what actually happens during the great reversal changes how you think about the finish line entirely. The day Marcus made his last debt payment, nothing visibly changed. Same apartment, same job, same Tuesday. But something underneath the surface flipped completely. This is what most debt payoff conversations miss. They treat the finish line as a financial event, a balance hitting zero, a monthly obligation disappearing, a number on a spreadsheet finally clearing. And yes, it is all of those things. But it is also a mechanical reversal of every force that had been running against him. Not gradually, all at once. Start with the most quantifiable part. For years, compound interest was Marcus's most reliable opponent. Every month, the interest on his balances is calculated and added and grows, working against him around the clock without pause. The APR on his credit card did not sleep. It did not take weekends off. It compounded continuously, pulling his balance in the wrong direction every single day he carried it. The moment that balance hit zero, the same force switched sides. That is not a metaphor. It is the literal arithmetic. The compounding that was extracting wealth from Marcus every month became the compounding that builds it. The same mechanism, the same mathematical principle, now working entirely in his direction. And unlike the debt, which had a fixed monthly obligation regardless of circumstances, the compounding on his investments accelerates over time. It does not stay flat. It grows faster as the base grows larger. A 2019 study tracked participants before and after their debts were fully cleared. The results were striking in ways that went beyond the financial. Participants showed a 25 percentage point drop in symptoms associated with clinical anxiety, not a modest improvement, a structural shift in baseline mental state. The background process that had been running continuously, the unresolved threat the brain kept allocating attention to, simply stopped, and the cognitive bandwidth that had been consumed by that process became available again. Marcus noticed this before he noticed the investment returns. The quality of his thinking felt different. Decisions that used to feel heavy started feeling clear. He took on a project at work that he had been avoiding because it felt too uncertain. He negotiated his salary in a way he had not been willing to before. He said yes to things that previously would have passed through the silent partner filter and come out rejected. This is why the great reversal is not just a financial event. It is a simultaneous lift across all three costs. The debt tax stops. The silent partner loses its vote. The cognitive tax clears. Three drains are closing at the same moment, and the resources they were consuming are being redirected into everything that comes next. In 2026, Americans who report being completely debt-free outside of a mortgage are statistically more likely to describe themselves as financially confident, career mobile, and in control of their long-term direction. Not because debt-free people are fundamentally different, because the structure they operate inside is different. The reversal is real. The question is what you do with it the moment it arrives, because free cash flow without a clear destination does not automatically become wealth. It becomes a lifestyle. And that distinction is exactly what the next part is about. Specifically, what Rachel's $1,217 can actually do when it is finally pointed at the future instead of the past. Freed cash flow is not the same thing as wealth. It is the raw material. What happens in the first 90 days after the last debt payment determines whether the reversal actually compounds or quietly dissolves into a slightly more comfortable version of the same month. This is the part nobody warns you about. The assumption is that once the debt is gone, the money naturally finds its way to the right places. It does not. Human spending expands to fill available margin with remarkable consistency. A 2026 survey of Americans who had recently paid off significant debt found that nearly half reported no meaningful increase in savings or investment in the 12 months following payoff. The money came free. Then it disappeared into restaurants, subscriptions, upgrades, and small daily decisions that each felt entirely reasonable in isolation. Rachel has been living on a budget shaped by debt obligations for years. The moment those obligations clear, her brain does not automatically shift into wealth-building mode. It shifts into relief mode. And relief mode is expensive. This is why the mission for the money has to exist before the money arrives, not after, before. Here is what that actually looks like in numbers. Rachel's $1,217 a month, redirected into a diversified index fund averaging 7% annual returns, does not grow linearly. At the 5-year mark, it sits at just over $89,000. That already feels significant, but the curve is just getting started. At 10 years, the balance crosses $222,000. At 20 years, it reaches $716,000. Rachel contributed around $292,000 of that herself. The remaining $424,000 came from the compounding, from time, from the simple fact of not interrupting the process. That $716,000 is not a retirement fantasy. At a standard 4% withdrawal rate, it generates roughly $28,600 a year in passive income. That is not a full replacement salary, but it is the difference between having options at 55 and not having them. It is the difference between taking the interesting job with the lower base and needing to take the safe job with the higher base. Translate the number into time, and it becomes even clearer. Rachel's debt payments cost her around 14 and a half years of monthly contributions before compounding. That is 14 and a half years of the curve not running. The $716,000 is not just money. It is time she spent paying backward instead of building forward. Now, knowing the destination exists is useful, but it only matters if the money actually gets there. And getting it there consistently, especially in the months right after payoff when lifestyle pressure is at its highest, requires a specific sequence of decisions made in a specific order. That sequence is what separates the people who cross the debt payoff line and keep accelerating from the ones who cross it and drift. The playbook is simpler than most people expect, but the order it follows is not arbitrary. Most people treat debt payoff as the finish line. It is not. It is the starting block. The sequence of decisions made in the first 6 months after the last payment clears matters more than almost anything that came before, because this is the window where the habits formed under debt pressure either get replaced with something intentional or quietly survive in a new form. Lifestyle creep does not announce itself. It just slowly absorbs the margin that was supposed to change everything. So before Rachel's $1,217 gets redirected anywhere, one thing has to happen first: the emergency fund. This is not optional, and it is not a side note. It is the structural foundation that makes every other step possible. The reason most people cycle back into debt is not lack of discipline. It is a lack of buffer. An unexpected car repair, a medical bill, a gap between jobs. Without a dedicated cash reserve, any one of those events sends a person straight back to the credit card. And the moment that happens, the reversal unwinds. In 2026, financial planners broadly recommend 3 to 6 months of essential living expenses held in a liquid, accessible account. For Rachel, with monthly essentials running around $2,800, that means building a buffer of between $8,400 and $16,800 before aggressively deploying money anywhere else. Not exciting, completely necessary. Once that buffer exists, the next move is capturing the full employer match on her 401k, that is, her employer-sponsored retirement account. And this is the one genuinely unconditional return available in personal finance. If Rachel's employer matches contributions up to 3% of her salary, and she is not capturing that match, she is leaving roughly $2,000 a year on the table. No investment strategy, no matter how sophisticated, outperforms a guaranteed 100% return on the first dollar in. From there, the sequence follows a clear logic. A Roth IRA, that is, an individual retirement account, where contributions are made after tax and growth is completely tax-free, should be the next destination. In 2026, the annual contribution limit sits at $7,000. For someone in Rachel's income range, the tax-free compounding a Roth provides over 20 or 30 years is one of the most valuable tools available. After the Roth is maxed, she circles back to maximize the rest of her 401k contributions. Then, once those tax-advantaged accounts are fully funded, any remaining cash flow moves into a taxable brokerage account. That is the full sequence: emergency fund, employer match, Roth IRA, full 401k, taxable brokerage. Each step in that order has a specific reason. Each one builds the structural foundation that the next one requires. The avalanche versus snowball debate fits in here too. Avalanche means attacking the highest interest rate debt first. Mathematically, it saves the most money. Snowball means paying off the smallest balance first, generating quick wins that sustain momentum. The honest answer is that the best method is the one Rachel will actually maintain for 2 or 3 years without abandoning. Consistency over 24 months beats optimization over 6. What this sequence ultimately produces is not just a larger account balance. It is a different relationship with money entirely. Rachel stops making decisions from a position of obligation and starts making them from a position of capacity. That shift does not show up on a spreadsheet, but it changes every financial decision that follows. And that is the whole mechanism, which makes it worth stepping back for a moment to look at what just happened across this entire story. Because the conclusion is not a summary, it is a realization. Rachel and Marcus were never that different. Same city, same income range, same basic options available to them. The gap between their financial lives was not talent or luck or timing. It was structured. One of them was running 3 hidden costs simultaneously without knowing it. The other had crossed a line that made those costs stop. That is the realization worth holding on to. Debt is not just a balance. It is a system with its own logic, its own momentum, and its own claim on your future. It takes wealth through compounding. It takes options through obligation. It takes capacity through cognitive load. And it runs all 3 continuously in the background, whether you are thinking about it or not. So here is what is worth watching in your own financial life. Not just the interest rate, Ask what the fixed monthly obligations are costing you in decisions not made, risks not taken, and thinking not done at full capacity. The number on the statement is the smallest part of the story. There is a related question that follows naturally from this one. If debt reshapes the decisions you make on the way down, what reshapes them on the way up? And does building wealth carry its own set of invisible costs? That one is worth sitting with. If this reframes how you think about what debt actually does, share it with someone who is still looking at the wrong number. And if you want to keep pulling on this thread, subscribe. The next video goes somewhere you might not expect.